the money.
Whom you'll be able to ask a few questions. So while I and any of the other speakers are speaking, just note down your questions, send it through to me, and then we will ask them the questions either at the end of their presentation or at the very end when we have the Q&A session. So yeah, welcome to tonight, where we are discussing finances under lockdown. Let me introduce you to our very first guest, and that is Henk Graaf. Henk, can you just say hi to everyone? Henk?
Hi, good evening.
Great, thanks, Henk. I was just checking if your mic is working well there. Henk works with, what is it? It's, remember I had the name down here, with SW Africa Destination Management. And today is just going to share with us how he, just from someone who owns a business, how he has been doing just during this lockdown. So I'm just going to give him the floor and he'll share however long he's got. And then afterwards, I'll ask him just a few questions. So Henk, you can go ahead and introduce yourself by explaining a few more things, and then you can go right ahead.
Thanks, Reggie. Good evening, everybody. Yes, my name is Henk. As Reggie said, I'm in the tourism industry. I have a small business called SW Africa Destination Management, and this business's main product, which it offers to clients, is that we offer holidays to South Africa. So holidays in all shapes and forms. So it could be people that come here on a holiday. It could be incentive groups from overseas that have chosen South Africa as their destination of choice. So really all sorts of different reasons why people would choose to come to South Africa, and they would then contact their travel agent in their country. And those travel agents, some of them are our clients. So we would get the brief from them and we would arrange the trip that fits with their requirements. So that's what we do. And then as a company, we also have a small interest in another business, which is also tourism related. And that business is managing and marketing game lodges. So both businesses very much dependent on international tourism. And so currently there isn't much going on, and our businesses are no exception. So yes, basically that means we don't have businesses anymore. Well, the businesses are still open, but there's no activity as such. It's mainly people that were planning and that had bookings to come to South Africa or Southern Africa that had to cancel their bookings, and we had to then refund them, or some of them chose to postpone their holidays to a date in the future. And so we also make the arrangements to postpone all those arrangements, making the bookings for a future date. And unfortunately, with no revenue coming in, we've had to, as I say, basically close down our activities. So all our staff, and on the SW Africa side, there's 9 people. On the game lodge business, there's about 110 people that have all been asked to just go and wait at home to see what happens. So it's not a very nice situation for everybody. That's basically it. Reggie, is that relevant?
think it is definitely relevant. It's good to hear. I think especially people in our circles in our church who are running businesses to hear. I think their struggles at this time. So you said you guys have had to stop quite a lot of activity at the moment. So what ways are you guys what ways are you guys able to run the business at the moment? And just thinking about your staff, have you guys had to go through a time where you've had to think we need to cut down on the team so that the business is able to survive in one sense?
Yes. So in the beginning, it was very much, it was a surprise. Nobody really saw this coming. So we had to plan, and we had different scenarios in our planning. So we said, well, let's say this will come back in 3 months' time. Let's say it comes back in 6 months' time. And the worst case scenario, let's say it comes back in a year's time. What makes it difficult, though, is that there's nobody that really knows how long it's going to take, because there's so many external factors. So we as a country might arrive at a point where we say, okay, the borders are open now, but then we still need all the other countries where our tourists come from to also open their borders, and then for them to decide whether South Africa or Southern Africa is a safe destination. So as time went on, we started realizing that this is almost an open-ended situation. So the temptation was there to try and, keep things ready and active for as long as possible. But it's a difficult one, because we might succeed in doing that for however long, but our clients overseas are facing the same challenges, and some of them have already had to close their businesses. So we are not sure, even if we survive, whether our clients will have survived. So it's a difficult one, and one doesn't know whether you should maybe loan finances to keep things alive, because at the end of the day, if you loan money, you still have to pay it back. And whilst your business might still be working, maybe the market that you're serving is not ready or doesn't exist anymore. So we had to make the hard decision of laying off all our staff indefinitely. And that's basically where we are at the moment. We're just waiting to see, and we are at the mercy of a lot of external factors. So basically we went from having a thriving business the one day to a very uncertain, almost no business situation a few months down the line. So yeah, that's.
Thanks for just your openness there, Hank. So I often see your Facebook posts, and from it, I can just tell, I can see the family spirit within your team and the people you work with. And I just wanted to hear, how are you as a Christian able to deal through this time? Because I imagine it's a difficult time, not just for your family, but also just thinking through the people you used to work with while you employed.
Yes. It is in a small company, one does get quite close to each other. You get to really know people well over time. And I was fortunate enough that most of the staff that I work with have been with the company for a long time. I'm also fortunate that several of them are Christians. So I've had a lot of support from them. So we support each other. I don't think there's anybody that is, how can I say, not understanding of the situation. That doesn't make it easier, because one knows that what people are going through. Some of the staff have got young families. My own family, the kids are a little bit older, so they are maybe we are in a better situation than some of them. So yeah, it's difficult. There's a strong feeling of despair, because you can't really do anything, or you can only do so much, and then you have to face reality.
Yeah, thanks for that, Hank. Anything just in terms of perhaps from just thinking of your own Christian life, of perhaps Bible passages that have helped you through this time, that have helped you personally?
Yes, it was, as I said, it sort of changed from the beginning. There was still a lot of hope that things wouldn't get as bad as it has, and as it seems to be doing. But gradually one became aware that this is really something that that is quite devastating. And what struck me the most is something that we all know as Christians, is that all these man-made successes that we are so proud of, I'm talking about things like technology and aviation and the world that's become so small, all of that came crashing down almost in an instant. And the Bible passages are plentiful about that. So it's not new, but it just confirms all these truths that we know. And what was, just to think of one particular passage, was the Hebrews passage that we all did not so long ago, where we were just reminded of all the truths in the Bible. And this situation for me has been something that has, if anything, just strengthened my faith, because the futility, if you like, of everything that people get so caught up in is just crumbling all around us. So, and the Bible yet is still the same truth today than it was before. So it was that reassurance that what we believe in as Christians is true. And it's there for everybody to see, now more than ever. So this is the predominant feeling that I have as a result of the situation we're in. And strangely enough, I won't say I'm not concerned, but I feel safe, if that makes sense.
Thank you for sharing those words. I think there's perhaps a lot more people who need to be reminded of that. And just hearing someone who is going through that and saying there is great safety found in our God, and in just the promises He has for us, His people living through these hard times. So thank you for that. I'm just going to open up to the floor. Just if anyone has any question to ask, you can send it through to me. I'm just going to wait for a little while. Just any questions regarding how just what Hank has just shared, or just if you yourself have lost your own business, how Hank's experience can help you through your own experiences at this moment. Hank, I have two questions that have just come up. The very first one is just regarding, so the government announced business rescue initiatives a while ago. Has any of that been something that can be helpful to your business? Are there like particular steps that you as a business have thought of taking in order to be able to access that that kind of business rescue funding?
Yes, thankfully we were able to claim from the UIF fund for all our staff, and we've received what we claimed for the first 3 months. It was known as the TERS, which is the I don't know what the abbreviation is for, but basically it's to assist employees through this time. It was for 3 months, and it's now the end of 3 months. So this is the first month that fund is no longer available, and staff will now have to claim from UIF in the normal way. So we benefited from that, which was a great help. It didn't always go so smoothly, but one can understand that this was a unusual workload, obviously, for them. And then there were several funds as well that one could apply for to get financial bridging funds that can see you through this period. But as I said earlier, the only challenge with that is that whatever funds you do get are in the form of loans. And even though the loans are relatively user-friendly, so the one I know of that we applied for gives you a year before you have to start paying back the loan. And the temptation would be to use that. But as I said before, it's a bit of a dilemma because things are so uncertain. One hesitates because it's not only our business, it's not only our country that's affected by this crisis, it's the whole world. And the clients that we built our business around might not be around in a year's time. And then it presents the problem of how would one then pay back that money? So it's a bit of a balancing act. And but yes, there have been resources which we're grateful for, but like I said, it's not so straightforward sometimes or always. And some of the funds we didn't qualify for because our turnover was either too small or too big. So some of the funds were for smaller businesses, others were for businesses with a certain minimum turnover and a maximum turnover. But there was one that we did qualify for and that we did apply for. And we're hoping that we could succeed in getting that. So we're busy working on that. We're looking at all avenues to try and rescue what there is to be rescued.
So someone has just sent what TERS is, temporary employee relief, employer-employee relief scheme. But the other two questions, I think one of them is something I wanted to, I asked, but I think the question that has been sent actually fleshes it out a bit more on just how you are doing emotionally at this time, having laid off so many people whom you, I guess, consider family, as you said.
Yes, it was a difficult day when I had the meeting with the staff on Zoom like this forum. It was just difficult to tell people what's going to happen because, like I said, I know the situation of all my staff, and I know what this effect will be on their lives. So for me to be the bearer of bad news was quite an emotional thing. But like I said, I have a good relationship with most of them. We're a small company. They gave me support as well. I got messages afterwards to say, don't worry. So it made it a bit easier.
It's great to hear just the relationship between you and your staff. And yeah, and just how you're able to support each other at this time. The other question is, has there been any increase or uptake in terms of locals who wanted to travel?
There's a strong indication local leisure travel market is chomping at the bit to start traveling, but that's not been allowed yet. So as far as the lodges business goes, we're looking forward to that reopening, because it does give an opportunity to open the lodges again, albeit in very different circumstances. The rates that locals can afford versus what international tourists can afford are vastly different. So at best, these lodges will be able to reopen and employ people again. Maybe not the same number of people, and maybe not the same level of services and so on, because everything is going to be scaled down. So the revenue will be a lot less. Therefore, we will be able to afford less, to employ less people, et cetera, et cetera. So, but it is something that will ensure the survival of the businesses. We are positive, and we were hoping that it would have opened already, but it wasn't to be yet. So we are just spending the time to make sure that the lodges know how to run with the new parameters, the protocols, and the requirements of the so-called new normal. So how is the food going to be served? How's the game drives going to be conducted, so that people feel safe and that they're not exposed to or subject to the transmission of the virus. So we're using this time to prepare, and we're just hoping and praying that things will be okay soon for the government to reopen the market for domestic tourists. That's our first goal, and we feel that's a lot more attainable than the international market. So all eyes on the local tourism market for us at the moment. My own business, unfortunately, was completely focused on international market. So therefore, we don't really have anything to offer to the local market as we speak. That market is also now going to be extremely competitive, because everybody will be looking at the same market. And so it would require some investment as well if you really want to play there. So we've decided to hold tight and not do anything as far as SW Africa is going, but on the lodges side, we are hoping that we can open soon for that.
Thank you for that, Hank. I see there are a few more other questions coming in. We'll come back and ask you those a bit later. I think one thing to say is very often when we see the COVID stats, whether it's people who are being infected by the virus or businesses that are affected, it usually seems like something that is far off. And I think hearing someone who's part of our family, just saying this is what their business has gone through, just reminds us to always just be praying for each other, especially at this time, so that God would really help us to get through it. I'm going to ask David to pray for Hank right now, to pray for him and the people he previously employed, especially that at this time, they would have strong emotional support to help them out. David, thanks.
Thank you, Hank, for sharing. I'm just going to pray for you, that God will give you strength. And just for the rest of our congregation, I know there are many who might be listening who lead businesses, who run businesses. And so we're just going to pray for them, and that they may hold on to Jesus at this time. There's a small one giving me problems here. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for the hope that we have in Jesus, that money is not all there is to life. We thank you for the gift of money, the gift and the ability to run businesses. And so we do pray, Father, for those who are running businesses within our church, that you just be with them at this time, that you'd come alongside them and encourage them that they would not despair, but wholly trust in you. So we do pray for Hank, that he would be a witness in his business world, that he would follow the example of Jesus, to not just think of himself, but for the sake of others, and where he can, to sacrifice and be generous. I do pray for those who lost their jobs. Do pray that you would provide and that they would hold on and not despair. All of these things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, David. Our next guest is Rangani, who's just going to give us a presentation. Just to let you know, every now and then in between, I will ask him, I might just stop him to ask him a question, just to emphasize on something that I think probably needs to be spoken about. And we will also give him time at the end so that you guys can ask him a few questions. And then a bit later, so straight after he's done, we'll have a panel. We'll get Hilliard, who's also here to join us, and also Paul, who is joining us from Cape Town. So yeah, guys, it's over to Rangani. Rangani, please introduce yourself. Just share about what you do as well before you start.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rangani Mbalati. I'm actually working as an accountant and an auditor. I do more consulting in public sector, and we also serve SMEs in terms of accounting. So we are actually, I'm also relating very well to what Hank just shared in terms of the way business has been during the current times. And it actually just hit home because we actually been, even though we are not in the same industry, but I have actually a better understanding of what he's talking about in terms of what has been happening to us over the past 3 months as well. Thank you. Reggie, I'll just share the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I hope the screen can be seen. If you can confirm for me on your side, Reggie.
Yeah, we can definitely see it.
All right, thanks a lot. So just in terms of the presentation that I've prepared is just to really look into particularly bringing the matter straight to ourselves in terms of the current pandemic that we're facing, to say we do understand that we listen to the news and we hear what the businesses are going through and also what government interventions are currently happening. But we just wanted to bring it ourselves to say what role can we play in shaping the economy of the country post the crisis that we're actually facing. So in this presentation, I just started by summarizing mainly the 2 points really being the GDP issue and the issue of unemployment, and then we'll look into other issues that might be facing the country, and then we spend more time as well to look at what are the practical ways in which we can actually be involved or we can play part as individuals and as well as being Christians. So the second slide, just as a starting point, is just to indicate the current situation. I think looking at the current news that we listen to daily, we will realize that the news have shifted more to talking about economics issues of GDP and unemployment and macroeconomic policies and all that. I think as much as the pandemic has brought about a lot of challenges or negatives, there is a lot of learning that we're actually getting as well. I think there are a lot of things that didn't matter to most of us before, but now we start to understand how does this actually affect our day-to-day. So in terms of the slide that we have, it's just an indication of how our GDP has performed in the first quarter of this year, January to March. So we can see that, and we might have heard that the GDP has actually went down by 2% compared to the same quarter in the prior year, which is 2019. Just something very important to share is that this figure is actually before the pandemic had started. So this was really before we got into the issue of the lockdown, which started at the end of March. It would have been mainly caused by probably seasonal changes, and a lot of it can be attributed as well to the load shedding. When there's load shedding, there's also challenges with regard to companies operating as optimal and doing what they're supposed to do. So this is just a representation or to say this is our starting point before the pandemic. And in terms of the estimations and what the economics will be talking about, we do expect the situation to be worse. And I think that's now a reality that everyone knows to say, we expect the situation to get worse in the second quarter of the year and probably going forward. So the slides, it's a continuation from the previous one. What I would like to share in particular to this slide is in terms of the industries, we would have expected, or in the past, we had expected industries like agriculture or your mining to be actually the key contributors to the economy. But what we do see is that what we call personal services, and mainly I want to include things like your informal sector types of business. Where you talk personal services, you are talking about things like your hair salons, people who are informal businesses or selling in the streets or food containers, those kind of things. They do actually play a major part in the economy or in the contribution to the GDP. As much as sometimes the direct collections of taxes might not necessarily be to the higher level. However, the value of services that are within that space are such huge and that you can't ignore. So looking at the fact that the pandemic has really affected mainly those informal businesses, it actually now means quite a lot in terms of what we can expect going forward in terms of the economy of the country. To say to revive the economy of the country, then you need to then start with those worst affected, and that will include mainly your personal services. I won't really touch into the rest of the other industries, as we can see from the slides. It does indicate exactly those which were worst hit, and I think mining was, and manufacturing would have been the biggest hit. Agriculture, I think the fact that we at least are still able to consume remains the much better one from the rest. However, I think it also didn't perform as you would expect, considering that we are not able to export as much as we want to based on the current situation that we are facing. On these slides, I'm summarizing mainly the issue of unemployment. In the first quarter as well, we have seen the unemployment increasing to 30.5 or to 30.1%. What that actually means, because we had moved from 29.1 and that's before the pandemic, it really just an indication that we're already headed to sort of a disastrous situation in terms of the economy of the country. We had, our numbers were already not looking so good, and where we are now, it has worsened, and the estimations are such that we could expect to be reaching around the 40% and region in terms of unemployment. So the situation is actually quite intense. I will talk about unemployment again on another slide, but just to indicate that with the importance of unemployment, in fact, in the economy is that you can't ignore it. Most of the collections in terms of the taxes of the country comes from personal taxes. So when you lose jobs, that means that the economy starts to do bad, and government also cannot collect enough monies. and then we start to have a situation where government borrows more money, and that leads also to increasing in taxes going forward. So the situation itself, it creates a cycle where we get stuck at the country. So we cannot necessarily ignore to say this is a function of the government, because when government is not doing well, it means that the whole country cannot actually do well. Hence, it's much more important to have a closer interest in terms of how actually government is doing. So the economists and other authors do summarize what are the current issues that we have in the country, and this may not necessarily be because of the COVID situation or the pandemic that we are facing, but the pandemic has actually exposed us as a country to some of the issues that we might have ignored in the past. So we might have downplayed some of these issues like inequality in terms of the standards of living of the people of South Africa. But now with the pandemic and also the situation we've seen when schools were supposed to open, whereby we got knowledge that some of the schools do not even have proper facilities in terms of to be able to have water, even just things like having a proper toilet. And those issues are not actually new. However, the pandemic situation has actually brought us to the reality of where we are as a country, to say we actually still have a long way to go in terms of addressing certain issues that we probably would have said we would have ignored. So in in a summary, I can just say that some of these problems that we have right now during the COVID situation, I would say it's a bad situation. However, it actually then make us as a country to sit down and rethink of how we actually go about doing our day-to-day business and say, is the focus has always been right or not? So in every negative situation, I can say there's also an opportunity to then learn from the situation, to say, how do we then learn from this current situation and improve? So in looking at the practical solutions, we will see how each of the solution could actually address the socio-economic issues that we're facing as a country. In continuation to the same, when I did the research, the South African Council of Churches had actually identified also challenges that they were looking into in terms of the country, and looking at what role can the church actually play in terms of addressing those socio-economic challenges. So if I look at the previous slides, which would have been the compilation done by economists or authors or people who write Sunday papers, and you compare to what the church leaders, in terms of the people who sit in the church councils of the country, you do see a lot of similarities in terms of what are the exact issues that we are facing as a country. And they do also propose certain solutions. I won't really dwell much into the solutions that are being proposed. However, this is a good guideline as well in terms of understanding how does actually the role of the church in actually dealing with the issues that are facing the country, the socio-economic issues. So it's just encouraging to note that there is quite a lot that the church can actually do, and some of the practical solutions we do see within our church, being Christchurch Midrand, where there are a lot of what I can call the learning groups, things like your divorce care, things like the number of groups that we actually have in terms of just learning the matters that dealing with the issues that affect our day-to-day life. So the role that the church can play. So we believe that even now during the current issue of the pandemic, there is definitely a role that we as individuals, believers, can actually play in shaping out how the economy becomes after the pandemic. So before I get into the practical solutions, looking at what happens at the workplace on a day-to-day, I made a bold statement, which I hope it's true, that our biggest problem is actually unemployment, and that if we are able to solve unemployment, we will be able to solve most of the country's problems. So if I look back at the problems that I've actually listed before, the socio-economic issues that I listed, really, when you look at the stagnant economic growth, economic can only grow when you create employment. The issues of high unemployment is the same, and equality. There are other issues that come in, things like crime and poverty and all that. There is a lot that you can attribute, not entirely, but there is quite a lot that you can achieve if you have majority of the people within the population of the country employed. You are able to solve quite a lot of problems. They are not entirely, as I said, there are quite a lot of other things that might be social that you need to deal with. However, in growing the economy from where we are post the pandemic, it's very critical that the focus of the programs that are being implemented deals with the issues of unemployment. Just to give maybe an example, I just remember growing up in the rural areas to say majority of the professionals would have been your teachers and your lawyers and your nurses. And then there was no really a much of a link between the income generated by the people, the employer being the government, and those professionals. So when you look at the current situations that we face, where people are now faced with being retrenched and sitting at home, then you start to learn and realize the smaller part that you play within an organization, to say, just because we have been hit with the reality of the COVID, then you start to realize that when I'm not going to work and do that small part that I do, the company is not able to actually generate income that I'm then able to sustain me and my family and assist me to contribute as well to my community and to the church that I go to. So you start to learn the value chain, to say what employment, the role of employment in actually in the whole value chain, which is quite critical in terms of how we actually fit it in. Just spend some time looking at what are some of the practical solutions that we can actually implement as believers. So I made reference to a scripture, which is Philippians 2, which talks to, we won't read the scripture, but the essence of the scripture, more especially in verse 3, it talks to us counting others as more significant than ourselves, or not focusing on ourselves when we are faced with a situation like this. In a situation when you have to defend yourself, or when you are facing a challenging situation, you're most likely going to go into a defense mode and most likely think about how do you save yourself than thinking about others. So I might be buying a food from the container outside the office where I work, and when I'm faced with this situation, I might be more thinking about myself, not understanding what impact does this situation have on that person who used to sell food to me, and a whole lot of other people who might be selling food in the streets. So as Christians, it's actually within our call to say we cannot now then sit back and say because of the lockdown, we are closing ourselves in our houses and preventing ourselves from the issues of the COVID-19. We do actually need to play a role or think of how do we then use this opportunity to impact others, or to help those who might be in a need, and again not thinking that we are more important than them. So the second bullet, I talked supporting local businesses. So there is a current campaign that Proudly SA has about buying locally manufactured goods. I think in our country it has become a norm that we have a lot of imports that are coming in, and we see how it has affected the factories and the old industrial areas that are no longer working, and people, because we tend to be more moving towards buying lots of imported goods. So the government tries to actually regulate this by having what they call local content requirements. So if you're going to supply anything to government, you must comply with certain requirements. I believe we can also play a much more important role in this type of sorry, Reggie. Close the door, please. We can actually play a much important role in supporting our local economies, more especially where we belong to a local. Sorry, I'm busy, right? I'm sorry about that. My daughter is not used to me working, being involved on a Sunday evening, so she brought me some tea. Thank you. So I believe we have the local communities where we belong to, and we do know people. Practically, I will give an example of the masks that we have. We might be knowing someone within our community who actually makes the mask. As much as Pick n Pay or Checkers or Mr. Price might still be a South African company, but there are vulnerable people within our communities who run their businesses that are not able to sustain themselves. And I believe it is the right time to always be considerate and thinking to say, is it possible that I could get the tomatoes from the person from the local community where I live? And what else can we consider buying from the people who are operating from the local communities where we are actually situated, just to ensure that we support those who are much more affected by the pandemic. And as I said earlier, that I strongly believe that those who are informal businesses might have been strongly affected. And again, because they are not registered in most instances, they are not able to apply any form of funding. And it really does mean that their livelihoods and their families, they are not able to actually maintain life. So we have roles to play there in supporting those who are closer to us. I mentioned starting small businesses. The environment might not seem feasible, but there are those who have an opportunity and who are gifted in being able to start something that can at least create an employment. It could be one or two person. I know of a friend who then decided, because there's a lot of food delivery happening around this time, they get a few scooters, and then they are able to employ one or two people who are able to then be able to involved in the sale of food businesses. So starting a small business, just to indicate that even if the person is not necessarily paying tax because of what they earn, it does play a bigger role in the economy, especially looking at the issues that we've mentioned above, to say there are a lot of socio-economic issues, not necessarily only contributing through paying taxes. However, when you take someone out of the streets, or when you take someone who does not, who was not working, you are actually making a bigger contribution in that you are supporting all those people who are dependent on those particular people. So when we have opportunities to actually start up something, it's also very important that we do consider what can we do at this moment to actually start small businesses. I think the government is trying to also advance small businesses by trying to make it easier for people to register businesses, and again to provide support in understanding that by having more small businesses, it will actually create more jobs and therefore grow the economy of the country. There are some theories that economists write to say that for the country, in particular South Africa, for where we are, because we seem to be at the crossroads and we stuck, they strongly believe that our way out of this situation is by creating small businesses and by supporting small businesses. So there is a case to actually assist in terms of growing the economy through small businesses. The issue of employment and taxes, I think we look at employment differently. I've given that example not so long in terms of when someone work for government and how they might have understood their role. The situation has actually also brought us to a much better understanding of what it means to have a job and not more than just working for money. In the book of Colossians 3, it talks to the issue of working as though you're working for the Lord, irrespective of the boss that you serve here on earth. So the thinking in terms of how we've been hit should actually shift. If we were more working about just thinking about ourselves and generating incomes for ourselves, we should think more about the value that employment plays in our lives, and again as Christians in terms of the what are we putting out there when we actually work, because it's not more about generating income. And I'm reminded of a talk, I think it was in 2016, that Martin shared to the men's breakfast, talking about men at work. I can't recall exactly the whole talk, but Martin had mentioned something to say that God himself is a worker. And that's what we see in the book of Genesis, to say God is a worker. And if we are made in the image of God, we actually also found value in working. So in other ways, we then have an opportunity to shift our way of thinking about work. We are able to think of work in line with the God's principles and what we've been created for as human beings, to say we've been created here to work. And again, as a byproduct, we are then be able to contribute taxes to the government that helps the economy to grow. Okay, so I spoke about discouraging a corruption. So one of the things that takes us back as a country, South Africa, or a unique problem to our country is corruption. Yes, other countries have corruption. Ours, we know it based on what we see every day, that the people are not able to get business straight away, and people are not able to sometimes get jobs straight away because there's someone who's always looking to get something in order for them to actually do their job of either giving business or giving work to people. So the role that we can play ourselves is to discourage corruption, to say we will not play part in any form of corruption. We will not actually encourage any of the government officials, or will speak up in terms of when we have found ourselves in the situation where we need to be involved in the issues of corruption. That might be small, however, it takes a few people to actually stand up in terms of breaking the cycle of something negative like corruption. So it's something that we all know, and our economy obviously it goes around the issue of politics, and politics are much more involved in corruption. We can play our small role there. Okay, minimum wage. So what I mentioned this to say, we do have people who assist us in our day-to-day, be it at home or at the company, cutting grass and all that. The government has introduced the issue of minimum wage. It might look small, but it's one of the ways that you can then be able, by complying with those minimum wage requirements, we are able to then be at least improving the livelihoods of those who work for us, and so that they are able again to ensure that they can take care of their families. So in a nutshell, those are just some of the practical ways that we can actually implement as Christians in trying to assist us to improve the situation. There might be many more other ways that we can do. Obviously, we have to think about where we are individually and see how we can, what part we can actually play. So in conclusion, I just want to say that there's no country which does not have challenges, and we are not the exception as South Africa as well. But the good news is that we live in a democratic country, and we have the opportunity as well to be key role players in addressing the challenges that we are facing as a country. In the times that we live in, more especially this time of the pandemic, I've said that we might find ourselves thinking of just switching to a self-centered mode that is all about me. I want to focus on myself because you want to be safe. However, we as Christians, we are called to think on differently, to not put our interests first, but the interest of our neighbors or the interest of those we live with. We must remain dependent on God for our challenges and solutions, not to think that we can actually do it on our own. And we need to continue to pray for our leadership in the country and the world as well, to ensure that they can do the right thing. We also need to be leaders in compliance when it comes to issues of ethics and the laws of the country, and ensuring that we put our effort in the right direction and we are actually the light of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahani, for that presentation. I'd like to just take you back to a few of the practical things that you had said. So you had mentioned SMEs, small and medium businesses, as well, enterprises, as being a big contributing factor to our economy, and this is in terms of job creation, and you've mentioned GDP as well, and also just the informal sector as well. So my question is there a need to almost teach business and entrepreneurial education, especially to township areas, perhaps, so that people understand that they don't always need to wait for a job, that where they are, they can use whatever skills they have to be able to start a business of some sort. I think you look at our country, and I think that's one of the things that you would say is almost missing, that there isn't much in terms of business education, whether, especially in an informal setting, you would say. And I'm thinking just for a few people here on our panel who are involved in business, who could perhaps take up such an initiative where they decide to do something like that. Is there room for that?
Thanks, Reggie. Absolutely. In fact, that's actually one of the key ways we can actually empower the people who are able to do something, but they do not know about how to go about doing it. So you do have a lot of people who might actually have the skills or are capable of doing something, but they do not know about how they can go about doing it. If I recall some years back, or probably 4 years or so, there was actually a course that was focusing on the same question that you spoke about. It used to be taught at Nokupila, I think on Saturdays. And I believe that was one of the key courses that was assisting the local communities as well, to help people to be more empowered, to say, I do not necessarily need to have a CV with the experience. If I can be able to do something, spend some time and do something that I can sell out there to make a living, I should actually do so. So I absolutely agree that there is a need to have a course that can actually focus on teaching business skills.
Thanks for that. Just another one, just on the back of that. So I see you've mentioned a number of things there. Is there anything else you could add that we as Christians could be doing, especially in thinking about how we can help each other? I'm thinking about people who've lost employment. How can we as Christians be helping each other at this time?
No, thanks, Reggie. In fact, it's a very tough one, the one that you're asking. And I think in the position that, like Henk said, I also found myself in a position where I had to let 4 or so people go. And it was a very, very tricky and tough situation where I couldn't really come up with a solution of how we can actually deal with that. But I believe it's a very valid question, and it's something that we might have to constantly think about to say, how can we actually, what role can we play? So at the moment, I can just say practically, Hank spoke about applying for UIF. So for those who lost jobs, who have been with the employers, they can at least still be able to get something from the UIF even after the temporary employee scheme is actually passed. So that would at least be able to bring something to their homes. However, the reality is we are facing a tough challenge, especially in terms of the issue of jobs. Probably there might also be a need to help each other in terms of reaching out and communicating to people to say, so that they could understand that they are not alone in the situation, because there might also be a situation where other people think that they are isolated or the situation is facing themselves alone.
Thanks for that. I think just a little bit more, I just wanted to hear if you think there's things we can do as a community. Just thinking about people in our circles who've lost employment and how we can help them. And then thereafter, there's a question that Kate wants to ask. So I'll give an opportunity to do that.
All right, should I go ahead? Okay.
Yeah.
So I think as a community, as you said, Reggie, I think the most practical way I think we can go about it right now is to identify opportunities to actually start up something in the business as the small businesses. That's what I could think about straight away, to say what ways can we actually reach out for those with a business, who run businesses, who actually understand how to run businesses, can at least be able to reach out to the people. Generally, the solution should also come from the community, where people might actually know what needs to be done. Maybe they do not have the capital to be able to start up what they need to start. And then we can come in, or they do not necessarily have a skill about how they can go about approaching. So the best could then be to provide the skills that they actually need, or to help them to give them the skills that they might actually need to make themselves have an opportunity to start up something.
Okay, thanks there, Rani. Kate, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Reggie. Thanks, Rangani. That's been really helpful. Just a question, you know, I look after some boys who live in Alex, and you know, I thought I had this great plan. I bought them a new washing machine and said, okay, maybe you can offer like a service to the community where you can charge them to do your washing. I've tried to get them to sell clothes. I've tried to get them to do a whole lot of things, and nothing is taken. So I know for someone like me, it's hard to, I've never lived in the township. So I presume there's so many other dynamics that are in play with trying to start something informal. So any comments on that?
Okay. Thanks, Kate. I think I had the opportunity one of the years to stay in Ebony Park. What I can just say about, more especially the township environment, they are actually people who have mastered the art of township business. And generally, even when it comes to the issues of, you'll note that there's a lot of back room rentals and all those kind of things. Generally, when you come and you are new to actually starting up something, you will find it hard to actually survive by yourself if you are not necessarily associated, or you do not understand how the environment operates. I do recall, in fact, meeting a gentleman who won an award from the FNB in terms of township economy. He's done very well. He owns quite a lot of business. So within the township, they also run this organization, I just cannot recall the name, which deals with, it's an association really for the people who are operating within the township economy. So it requires a specific look. In your case, for example, we just need to really do a proper analysis and understanding of the environment where they actually live specifically, because you might find that again from that particular section, the people can't even afford to have their laundry washed, and they pay for it, no matter how small it is, because they are not able to afford. But I do believe that the other way to actually go about would be to really do some more studying, specifically looking at exactly the basic economics, to say what is the demand in this area, what exactly can we do, and how we can actually structure it to make it more attractive. There's always ways to actually be innovative in the current environment with all internet and the technology that we have. So to be competitive, obviously you need to come up with something that you're trying to read the mind of the people you are selling to and understanding the environments where they are. But I do believe that if we do spend some time looking into that, something could come up. You might find that that business idea might not have worked because of the situation around the area itself.
Thank you, Rangani, for that. I just have, so there's a question that's just been said.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to read it from Sbu Mlocha. In the townships, you do have people who are excellent in what they do. The challenge they have in opening up new markets in suburbs who can afford to purchase their services and products. Is there a way that Christians in suburbs can be intentional about supporting guys in the townships who are excellent in their craft?
No, thanks, Reggie. Actually, it's a very, very good question. I just want to indicate that if you look at my haircut, I went to Clayville today to cut my hair. I wash my car in Ebony Park or Clayville, and there are a lot of other people who, I'll give another example. We were doing a photo shoot for this other company I'm involved in. It's in human resources. So I looked for a guy in Tembisa where we can go and do photo shoot. But I realized that most of the people that we are involved together were not willing to go to Tembisa. They had this mindset that they're going to take our cars, they're going to rob us. And I took these people who live in these good estates and I took them to Tembisa. But when we left Tembisa, they actually were amazed as to say, wow, Rangan, we didn't know this is, we can have a studio, a photo shoot studio in Tembisa. And I mean, we are paying 1,000 rand. If we were in Santin, we would have paid 5,000 rand. So I strongly believe that there is definitely, we can be intentional as Christians and in terms of the way we choose the service providers who assist us, more especially when we look at the proximity of, as an example, of these townships to the suburbs. It's so close that it doesn't actually take you so long to actually reach out. But there are a lot of people or young people who are actually doing businesses there who are not actually able to get the good support because of maybe the way of, just because they are located, in Tembisa. So from my side, probably because I grew up in the rural areas and I still actually try my best from my own side to say, if I'm going to do a website or something, if there's a good guy in Tembisa who actually needs to kickstart, and I'll give him an opportunity. So if I need to do a logo design, there's quite a lot. The design software is the same, whether you're in Santin or wherever, Midrand, it's actually the same. So I believe that we can actually be intentional and we can be able to reach out to these young people who are running businesses and support them to grow. Thanks, Reggie.
Thank you there, Rangani. I think we need to remove Martin from the meeting because of his comments. I want to introduce you to now our next panelist, Hilliard. There are a few questions that David and I will ask him. I'll ask him the very first one, and then David will take over thereafter. Hilliard is, you would say, in investment banking, well, one of the first questions I'll ask you is, at this time as a Christian, it's a difficult time in our country and our world, as we've heard. As a Christian, let's say I am helping a few people that are part of my economy, but I have funds that are left over to invest. Is it worthwhile to think about investing, despite where our economy is at the moment?
Excellent question, Reggie. So hi, Hilliard, says H over there. I think I would say for anything you do want to invest in now, make sure that it's very liquid. And by that, I mean, make sure that it's something that you can get out of quite quickly. What we saw in March is that if you want to get out of certain kind of investments, you needed to take massive haircuts. So the price would have just gotten absolutely smashed. So you would then have to have maybe taken a 10% haircut if you were lucky. Some stuff 30% down, others you might have been 40 or half price. And that was just the price you paid for not having investments that were liquid at the time. And why I say that is, I told David, I'm probably like a prophet of doom here. Things could get worse from here on out. This is like we're not really in the clear yet. We'll probably only be in the clear when there is an actual cure. That being said, you've got to now be very wise with any investment that you do make. Just because it's going to have more consequences than at other times. Does that help in some way? So I think it is a very good time to invest. Also, if you're investing in a proper crisis with spare cash, you can make some big returns. But it comes with risk because you never know where the bottom is. So, yeah.
Hilliard, just a question there. Can you?
Yeah.
So for some who are not in the accounting or even business field, can you explain just some of the terms you used? Liquid.
Okay.
So what would you mean by investment?
Okay, cool, perfect. No. Let me start and dial back a bit. So when I say get something that's quite liquid, means that you can, I would use the term unwind that quite quickly. So you could sell it maybe same day, same hour, get out of that thing for like 3 or 4 days from now. And why I say that, imagine you get a massive supplier payment that you need to make if you're a business owner. If you're a homeowner, say your geyser bursts or something, or you're in the unfortunate event of having some large medical bills that maybe you now have a 10,000, 20,000 expenditure you need to fork out. Just to be able to get out of that, that's what we'll call liquidity. So that you can easily realize whatever that investment is and turn it into cash. So the most liquid thing would be physical, actual cash. Then it would be your banking or checking account. Then it would be stuff like money market funds. Shares are liquid, but their price would vary quickly, because if you want to sell a share, you can sell it tomorrow, first thing, 9 a.m., and it will come. You'll get the physical cash a few days later. Illiquid things would be investments in businesses. So say you invested in a unlisted business, and maybe it employs 20 or 30 people. It's a great investment, but you're not going to find sellers for that within a few days. You know what I mean? Like, it's a long-term exit strategy. And that's the toss up between the two. So all these investments in small and medium enterprises, if you do have spare cash and you want to make them, you need to go in it and stay in it, if you know what I mean. And you need to, and this will be from, like, say, maybe a Christian standpoint, but also from a worldly standpoint for those kind of businesses, they're not something you can go into quickly and move out of quickly. You can't, I want to say, ask the other owners to buy it off you just because you need to make payments that you didn't foresee, or it would be unfortunate if you needed to find, and say, maybe let's use property as an example. Say you bought an investment property, a house, or you thought you're going to rent out, and now you need to sell it. And it might take a month, it might take 2 months, but you can't get out of it quickly. So, but you're going to have to think about what your cash flow actually looks like. So if you know you've got a lot of spare cash, you have almost certainty of income, and say you one of the fortunate with a lot of cash to spare, you can actually look through all this trouble and have like a 1 year or 2 year view, which is phenomenal. But if you have a 1 week, 1 month view or 2 month view, my recommendation would rather be in investments that you can actually get out of for close to what you think its market value is. And so they've also asked about haircut. So haircut, I would say it would be a knock you take on the capital amount or on the price of the actual asset if you didn't need to sell it immediately. So say you bought a house this week and 3 weeks later you now need to sell it, and it's an emergency sale. You're not going to be able to sell it for the price you bought it now. You're probably going to have to sell it for 20% or maybe 30% down from what its actual value is if you could wait a while to realize its value.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, sure, David.
The MC has given me permission. So, I mean, a lot of those stuff is helpful. But just thinking about like some of us who might not afford property. So just thinking about my bank account right now, I'm in trouble. I don't have any money. Perhaps I've been laid off, or whatever the case may be. Okay, so that's the one situation. Somebody without money. Question would be like, what do I do in that situation? Then another person with cash flow, money. You're a Christian. There's been a lot of, and I like this, the contributions tonight. A lot of talk about not just thinking of ourselves, but considering the needs of others. Like in what ways, Age, do I just go on if I have money, buy stuff? Is that even wise? Like, what would be your take on that? Someone who doesn't have money, what can they do? Someone with lots of money, a Christian, how should they be stewarding their money for the sake of others during this time? And I think some of the solutions have been given, but what are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And yeah, I think there have been some very, very good solutions and contributions from earlier on. Maybe let me first address if you do have spare cash flow now. And I'm not going to make it as spare cash flow as you actually really wealthy and want to start an investment portfolio. I'm going to take spare cash flow as you have steady income, you haven't gotten a salary cut yet. And I think I'll address it in a way as what would best go for the economy, what would be best as a like for your personally, what would be the best thing for you to do, and then what would be the best thing for you to do as a Christian. Because in these examples, sometimes they're actually not the same solution. There's no one size fits all with that. And here you'll see where there may be some conflict here. So, and say a very good example would be how you look at your disposable income and your disposable spending. So best thing for the economy now is if you go out and buy absolutely everything you can. Spend, spend, spend. David, you're on the right track here. Because what's basically happened is the economy's gone into free fall or standstill, and money's not moving quickly enough in the economy. So you need retail sales up, you need restaurants to be filled and need people buying stuff there. You need your service industries to start being utilized, and that would be, say, your hairdressers, your salons, your personal care stuff. And to get the economy going, you should really be spending as much as you can possibly there. That's economy-wise. Personal, what would be best in this time would actually not be doing that. So if you are looking at just yourself instead of the broader economy, it should not be spend, 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 because you never know when the taps might run dry in the current environment. It could get a lot worse from here, and I know I'm probably Mr. Doom and Gloom here, but we could be here for another 6 months, another year until the whole world's vaccinated. So you sort of want to also make sure that you do have a little savings strategy or plan. And if at the bare minimum you're starting to actually just pay off some debt that you have. So the worst debt would be credit card debt, start making some payments on there. Your overdraft, start making payments on there. Chip away at your home loan also. But like say, this is purely in your personal capacity. What works best for you would then be also just making sure that you are, again, liquid, because if the worst comes to worst, you don't want to be in a scenario where you need to go declare bankruptcy or get liquidated. Then as a Christian, it's sort of what you should be doing as a Christian is helping your fellow Christians. And here's where you could actually do more than one thing that works for both the economy and for you while helping others. Because what it does say what the Lord does say is, if you have 2 shirts and your brother has none, you need to give him 1 shirt. So what you could do to keep the economy going out there now that it's winter, the worst is, I think, hopefully is over for winter at least, buying some blankets, buying some clothes and giving it to the poor, whether it's through a church charity or whether it's through a charity of your own choice. That's great. Whether you actually want to get yourself something nice and new, get that, but then give something of yourself away as well, so that you are actually considering others. It would be something like that. As if you are going through now financial hardship, and this is the tougher one. Some people in SA have been in financial hardship for the longest time, and more South Africans will enter financial hardship in the next, say, 6 months. And initially, I had some horrific statistics about the global economy, but I think I'll park those for today. We've had all the speakers already saying how bad it is, so we know it's bad. But here's where the Bible again doesn't give guidance, but it gives comfort. So remember when Israel were in the wilderness, and the Lord provided for Israel. And say now when Jesus and all the crowds around him, and he provided for the crowds, and his disciples thought there's no way he can feed the fish with what he has, but the Lord provided. And if any of you really look at the national budget closely, and you look at, say, like SA's response to the government's response to the COVID crisis. So compared to every other central bank or government in the world, they have, so the biggest central banks being the UK, the US, Japan, Germany, and China together spent $7 trillion to save those economies from COVID. We didn't spend anything close. And this is not bad on ESA. We are an emerging market economy, but what it does say is we now need to lean on the Lord for our comfort. There will come a time where instead of drifting away from the Lord, we're going to have to drift closer to Him, and He will provide for us. So it's a great opportunity there. If you are, and now I'd like to maybe just touch on somebody that's, say, you know, the worst is coming. You see your company hasn't, that you've not been laid off yet, but you can see no one's going to work or anything. Good thing to do then, from, say, your first, and I think this is your personal standpoint, would to make sure you actually have enough cash flow in a downturn scenario to actually make sure you can see it through every month. And maybe this is where you're going to have to shift away from what's best for the country and economy and just look at what's best for you and your family. And I'll touch on what's best for the church in a bit, because there you're really going to have to make sure you can take a 30% haircut in salary if that comes. Because this is from a little, say, small survey of my friends, and say salary cuts are now between, say, 10 and 30%. So you need to make sure you're able to survive on a 30% salary cut. So there's things you might need to scale down on luxury-wise. Certain brands you used to buy before, maybe buy something cheaper. If there's any things in your lifestyle that you could scale down, it might be a very good time to scale down. And this is now where the church part is going to come in, right? Because it's sometimes very easy to think, I have a massive expenditure here that no one knows that I can just make disappear. And this is like, say, church giving to any charity that you normally do. And that you should really think long and hard before that becomes the first thing you cut, right? So luckily I was not in the situation where I would have needed to say, I'm going to use the words yet here. I always use the words yet. I'm not yet in a situation where I have had any of my salary or anything cut. So I knew I could actually give a bit more in this time. But even if I was in a situation where I actually had my income cut, the church shouldn't be the first place that you cut your expenditure, because the church it's God's work. The church is doing a lot to help the community in this time. And if God is the first thing you cut out of your life and your wallet when times are tough, is that where your heart is actually? So I don't know if that helps, sort of.
I think there's a lot of somebody's mute. So I think one of the things that you're saying is, I mean, and this goes to what Rangani was saying with regards to, we have to spend money so that the economy keeps going, but not even think about spending it on yourself. Perhaps the things that we're going to spend on, to reconsider where and how we do that spending. The other thing is, I mean, for our church, for instance, this is a plug to our Mercy Ministry. So La Vela is an organization that we've been part of, and there's been a lot of contribution from our church members towards that, towards feeding the poor, towards not just thinking of ourselves only. So I think we can do, if we are Christians with money, a lot of spending on that. In a perfect world, you'd go to Tembisa to buy off the streets, to buy those potatoes, and then bring them to church. So the economy is going, and we're helping the poor, but we also not just thinking of ourselves. So I think there's a lot that we can do, a lot that I think is quite helpful. I'm quite, and I think what you're saying regarding our situation is that there's a lot of scary times ahead, and I think it calls for us, all of us, to be trusting in God and to be trusting in Him to provide in whatever way He does that. And so we just want to lean in onto that at this time. I don't know if there's any other stuff that Rangani perhaps wanted to add to that.
David?
Yes.
Sorry, man. Do you want to ask the other question? So let me just ask the question.
I'll actually add something. Sorry, before you carry on. So I think I just want to point out, people shouldn't get into a lax to think that retrenchments won't continue. And I hate to be a prophet of doom, but they might, because businesses look at what's happening, and if they cannot afford to carry people anymore, there will be more retrenchments. So I think it's very important to be flexible and to also find out what's happening within your company. If your company is doing well, and if there's somewhere else where they could utilize your resources, so that you don't just like fix yourself to, this is the job that you know how to do, and you stop at that. Yeah, and the other thing is, I think this is a good time, if you have extra cash, you gotta cut down your debt, hey? Because I found that is like a major point where debt disenables you to be flexible and liquid. Because then you're paying a whole chunk of money towards paying off debt. So and interest rates are lower now, so if you can pay off debt now, it's a great time to do it.
Reggie? So we actually, I just realized that we have actually run out of time. We need to wrap things up. However, I'm going to pray for us to end off our time together formally, but there was a lot of questions that I had for, especially Paul, because he hasn't spoken, regarding career and thinking about how we can find different ways to make money and all of that. So I'm going to pray for us to end it off, but I'm just going to encourage you to go through our church website. We did a sermon series on money. Please go through to that. I like the fact that Rangani points out some of the teaching regarding to with regards to work. So I'd encourage you to go onto our website, to our sermons, to check out anything that has to do with money, stewardship, with work, because those really get us thinking, and particularly in this time, they have a different application. And just to remind us that God calls us to be stewards of the money that we have. And I think the point that we want to go home with is that He calls us not to just think of ourselves, but to consider others. So times are tough, and it is a temptation. And I know for me, it has been the temptation to hold on to every little cent that I have. But He calls us to be generous, particularly to the poor during this time, and those who are affected. So I'll leave us with that and encourage us with that. I'm going to end off in prayer. And then if you have questions, please bring them through to myself or Reggie. And then we're going to answer those. Father, thank you so much for our time together. Thank you for your sustenance, that even though the situation is bad, you are still in control. And we thank you that we can find comfort in that you are a God who still has His hand on the wheel. I pray, Lord, that you would help us to be and consider being generous and open-handed even when the times call us not to be. We remember the widow who had nothing yet gave. And so we do pray, Father, that you would root our lives in something greater than the material things of this world. So at this time, please be with us. Please be with those who are struggling. Please draw us closer together as a family, that we may help one another and see this through. We pray these things, trusting in you. In Jesus' name we ask. Amen. Amen. So if you feel like slipping out, you are free to do so. We've come to officially the end of our time together, but we will be taking more questions. So if you do want to stick around, please do stick around. Reggie, do you want to take questions? Do you have any questions that you want to ask?
So just one thing, there's Rangani has just sent the presentation through, and I think it would be great to first hear from Paul. Then we can come back to that question.
You want to hear from me?
So, Paul, regarding career changes, how would you just advise somebody who has lost their job, or like I'm thinking, man, I should leave this ministry thing, go out there and make money to support other people in ministry? Yeah, like how would you sit down with me, because that's what your job is, to just walk me through what I can be doing? If you have any thoughts, if you don't.
Usually what I recommend, David, is when people say to me they're thinking of their careers or changes, I ask them to put their CV together for me. Because I think actually your history will actually kind of pinpoint where your interest lies. And I think a lot of people underestimate the skills that they've gathered throughout time. So like, for example, let's say, for example, you. So you're like a pastor, and you could say, actually, all you know to do is to teach the Bible, but actually, you know how to teach. You know how to organize a program. You know how to lead people. And so you could also be a project manager. Not giving any ideas, Martin, just saying, as an example, that like, I think people see their careers and their roles very singularly. And we shouldn't do that. And people assume that the role that they'll have now, they'll have in the future, but that's not necessarily true. You should actually be inquisitive about what else you could be doing all the time.
I think that's helpful. I think Rangani wants to join in on that, because one of his things was that we need to think differently about work, about some of the things you're doing. I know that some people have used their fancy cars to be on delivery, so they're doing deliveries with their fancy SUVs because the times require us to do that. Rangani, do you want to say something?
Thank you. In fact, I wanted to just take Mpho back to the earlier response she gave, just to understand something. She spoke about paying off debt. So I was saying, Mpho, wouldn't it be better when it's uncertain to keep the money that you have instead of settling debt? I'm just saying that you might settle debt and you die of hunger. You know, wouldn't it be better to just for a little while and keep the money and see how you know, the situation is actually settling? Because I think it's just so tricky for everyone. You find you spend some money to settle debt, you think you are free, but the next thing you can't afford day to day.
So, Rangani, you've got a point. And I've heard a financial counselor say, cash is king during a pandemic. Mm-hmm. So keep as much cash as you can. So the debt part is actually my own personal philosophy. So I'm very big on, I don't like debt. And so like when I spoke to David, I said to David, I don't budget, but I budget philosophically wise. So I don't spend money I don't have. Mm-hmm. So like I make sure that my credit card is on zero. So even though I've got my account, I don't tap into my overdraft. And I think a lot of South Africans are over indebted. So I think you need to watch your own spending to say, like, am I okay? Is it okay to like start getting into this debt that I have? Like for example, like Edgar's. I used to have an Edgar's account. I used to spend there every single month. But the minute I cut it, I stopped going to Edgar's. Because then I was like, what am I doing at Edgar's? So I think what I'm saying is, like, from a philosophy, general point of view, watch your debt.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. All right, thanks. With regard to jobs, I also wanted to have a follow-up on the issue of jobs. I get a lot of Facebook messages, almost daily. A lot of people asking, and are you not hiring? You spoke about people must know exactly what they interest in or what they would like to do. But what I do find out is most people, in fact, those who contact me, they do not obviously have relevant experience in terms of what I do. They want me to hire them. They're like, no, can you just hire me? And when you start to talk about, okay, what field of specialization you are in, there's quite a lot of people. I think that's what I see. I am generalizing in South Africa where people are saying, look, anything, just I'll do anything that you give me to do. So I think in that, probably I think from the perspective of being employable, there's still much more need to educate people, or maybe have these programs. I think there's Guaranteed Trust. They are here in Midrand. Guaranteed Trust do those employability skills, whereby they teach people to be employable. Whether you come with this certificate or degree or what, because I think most of South Africans really, I come across people who seem to be confident, but they can't really say what exactly they want. They just say, give me a job, but they don't know exactly, what they want. So I believe that probably these employability programs are becoming much more important or needed right now. I don't know what's your view on that as well.
Rangani, I agree with you. I've heard people say, like, yes, I just want a job, any job. And it's like, it doesn't work like that. People don't, like, it's like, you need to think about what separates you from the next person. And you need to remember, as much as you're applying, there's probably 10 other people. So what will Rangani get from employing me? So, like, even if you say, Rangani, I've worked as a waiter before, I'm really good on my feet, I can learn very quickly, and I'm eager and passionate to learn in this field, and I know this is what I'm good at. So then it gives you information to say, okay, compared to 10 other CVs that are in my inbox, I know why I'm being hired for this. Yeah. And the other things, people don't research who they're engaging with. So somebody will engage with you, but not know who your clients are, not know what industry you're in. So we need to do a lot more research when you're approaching somebody for a potential role or a position.
All right, thanks.
There's just one question, sorry, David. There's just one question that was sent earlier. If both of you can just go at answering this. Considering that the interest rates are low at the moment, is what the person says, and we see people get into debt, whether it's bonds or installments, because of these low interest rates. Is it wise to do such a thing at this moment, with the hope that these interest rates would stay low, at least for the next couple of years? So let's say someone is thinking of getting a property at the moment.
Yeah.
What would your advice be?
If I can answer, Reggie, my view is if you've been looking to, let's say, buy property for some time, and at this point in time, it will be a good opportunity to buy. But I think if your decision is made up of the fact that you want to take advantage of the interest, I don't think it will be a good decision to make, because we know that the interests are where they are based on the current situation. Now, Reserve Bank is very conservative. They are most likely going to, when the situation changes, which we don't know when, they will probably, increase the rate. So it's actually really dependent on where you are. But if really it was always something you have been budgeting or working towards to say, I want to get a property, then it would be good to actually do that. And probably it's a good time to also consider fixed interest in this time, because we most likely, I don't think we're gonna get this low in many years to come. Probably we might go some 0.5% lower again in end of July or so. But yeah, it's the lowest it can get, I think, from our side as South Africa.
I agree. I think don't buy a house based on this interest rate. Assume that the interest rate will be as high. I think there was a time when the interest rate was like ridiculously high, and that's what it could result in. And you don't want foreclosures after this.
Thank you to both of you. Hilliard is left. It would have been great to thank him as well for joining us today. I don't think there are any other questions, so we can end off our time together. Thanks again, Rani and Paul, for joining us, and for everyone else for listening.
It's nice to see all of you guys.
You must come back from exile.